Ruth always believed she and her daughter Maya had no secrets. After all, they had been through so much together. It was just the two of them for years, ever since Ruth left her husband, Victor. Life had been hard, but they managed to build something safe. They shared meals, late-night talks, even silly arguments about TV shows. But then suddenly things started to change. It began small. Maya started leaving the house at odd hours. Sometimes at 6 in the evening, sometimes much later, always saying, "Don't wait up, Mom. I'll be fine." Ruth thought maybe it was just a phase. Maybe her daughter was dating someone new, or maybe she was just hanging out with friends. But when Ruth asked, Maya would smile too quickly, almost nervously. "It's just work, Mom. Nothing exciting. You wouldn't understand." Those words stung. You wouldn't understand. Ruth couldn't stop thinking about them. She wanted to believe her daughter, but the secrecy grew heavier each day. Maya stopped letting Ruth see her phone, she avoided questions about her pay, and she never brought home a uniform or name tag like most jobs would require. Ruth's mind filled with worries. Was Maya in trouble? Was she involved with the wrong people? Ruth stayed up late at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining the worst: bars, nightclubs, shady backrooms filled with smoke. Each thought hurt more than the last. She trusted her daughter, but she also remembered the lies she had once believed when she was married to Victor. Lies had nearly destroyed her then, and she wasn't about to ignore them now. One night, Ruth tried again. She placed a cup of tea in front of Maya and asked softly, "Where do you really go, sweetheart? You're never home for dinner anymore. You come back tired, but you won't tell me anything." Maya sighed and rubbed her forehead. "Mom, please. It's just work. Let it go. I promise I'm fine." Ruth's chest tightened. The way Maya said please felt like a wall. There was no space for Ruth to enter, no crack to peek through. For the first time in years, Ruth felt shut out of her daughter's world. The following week, Ruth noticed something strange. She was folding laundry when Maya's bag fell open on the couch. A badge slipped out, just enough for Ruth to see the edge of a lanyard. The letters were half covered, but Ruth caught two words: Unit C. Her hands froze. What kind of workplace had units? It didn't look like a cafe, a store, or an office ID. Her heart raced, but before she could pick it up, Maya rushed in, grabbed the bag, and stuffed the badge back inside. Their eyes met. Ruth didn't ask, and Maya didn't explain. That silence was heavier than any answer could have been. That night, Ruth sat in bed staring at her daughter's closed door. She could hear faint music playing from inside. The same song looped again and again. Ruth realized she had a choice: keep pretending or find the truth. The next day, Maya left as usual, saying, "Don't wait up." Ruth waited only 10 minutes before grabbing her coat and car keys. She parked a street away and followed quietly, headlights off. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, her throat dry. She hated spying, but her fear was stronger than her guilt. Maya drove with calm confidence, like she had done this route many times. Ruth followed each turn, heart thumping with every stoplight. They left their neighborhood, passed through the quieter side of town, then entered a road Ruth rarely used. Her chest tightened with every mile. "Where are you going, Maya?" Finally, Maya's car slowed near a large gray building surrounded by fences. Floodlights glared across the parking lot. Ruth's eyes widened. She had seen this place before, but only on the news or in passing. It was the state correctional facility. A prison. Her jaw dropped. She gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She watched as her daughter parked calmly, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the guarded gate. The officers nodded at her, checking something on her lanyard, then let her pass through. Maya's shoulders were steady, her walk sure. She belonged there. Ruth could not breathe. Her daughter, her sweet Maya, the girl she had raised with so much care, was walking into a prison as if it were the most normal thing in the world. For a long moment, Ruth sat frozen. Questions crashed into her mind one after another. Was Maya visiting someone? Working there? Why had she hidden this? And most terrifying of all, what if she was in danger inside? The building loomed in front of her like a silent warning. The tall fences, the sharp wire, the cold stone walls. It all screamed of the past Ruth had tried to bury. A past filled with control, cruelty, and locked doors. She had fought so hard to give Maya a life free from those shadows. And now, it seemed, her daughter was walking straight into them. Ruth pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, fighting tears. She had found the truth she wanted, but it wasn't the kind that brought peace. It was the kind that left her shaking in the dark, waiting for her daughter to come back out of those gates. When Maya finally did, hours later, she looked calm, even proud. Ruth quickly hid her car behind a passing truck, not ready to reveal herself. She drove home ahead of her daughter, her mind spinning with fear, anger, and heartbreak. That night, Ruth lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling again. But this time, she wasn't imagining shady clubs or mysterious friends. She was imagining the prison walls, the echo of footsteps in long corridors, the faces of men behind bars. And the one question that kept circling in her mind was this: why there, Maya? Why a prison? And deep down, Ruth knew this secret was only the beginning. The next morning, Ruth could not look at her daughter without seeing the image burned into her mind. Maya walking confidently through the prison gates. She poured coffee, buttered toast, and tried to act normal, but her hands shook. Every clink of the spoon sounded louder than it should. Maya, on the other hand, seemed calm. She chatted about the weather, about a neighbor's dog that barked all night, about nothing important at all. Ruth nodded, smiled when she had to, but inside her heart was thudding. She wanted to scream. How can you sit there and laugh when you spent last night inside a prison? Finally, she couldn't hold it anymore. She set her cup down and asked softly, Maya, why didn't you tell me about your job? Maya's smile faded. She looked down at her plate. Mom, please, not this again. Ruth leaned forward. I followed you last night. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Her voice cracked. I saw you go into that place. The prison. Maya froze. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she closed her eyes and whispered, I knew you wouldn't understand. Ruth's chest tightened. Understand what? That my daughter spends her nights behind bars? That she lied to me? Maya pushed her chair back, her voice trembling but firm. I didn't lie. I couldn't tell you yet. Because I knew you'd worry. And now look, see how scared you are. Of course I'm scared. Ruth's voice rose, louder than she meant. That place is dangerous. People die in there, Maya. And you walk in like it's just another job. Maya didn't answer right away. She stood by the window, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She looked older in that moment, as if the weight of her choices had carved years into her face. Finally, she said, It's not what you think. I'm not in danger. I'm not a guard. I'm not reckless. I'm helping people, Mom. That's all I can tell you right now. Helping people. The words echoed in Ruth's ears, but they brought little comfort. Who could possibly be helped inside those cold walls? She thought of men in orange uniforms, men who had hurt others, men like Victor. Her stomach twisted. Later that evening, when Maya left again, Ruth found herself unable to sit still. The image of her daughter stepping into the prison gates haunted her. She remembered how calm Maya had looked, how the guards had nodded at her, as if she belonged there. What if something happens to her in there? Ruth thought. What if one of those men? She couldn't finish the thought. Her hands clenched so tightly the skin went white. Hours passed slowly until finally, headlights swept across the living room curtains. Ruth peeked through and saw Maya pull into the driveway. She looked exhausted but peaceful, like someone who had finished meaningful work. Ruth stepped back quickly so Maya wouldn't know she had been waiting. For days, the routine continued the same way. Maya left at odd hours, walked into the prison, and returned late at night. Ruth tried to ask again, but Maya's answer was always the same. Trust me. Please. But trust was hard when Ruth's past still lived inside her. She remembered Victor's cruel eyes, his fists, his threats that turned their home into a cage. She had escaped those locked doors years ago. And now her daughter walked into them willingly. One rainy evening, Ruth could not hold back anymore. She waited outside in her car again, parked far enough to not be noticed. She watched the heavy gates open and close, saw the floodlights bounce off the wet pavement, and felt her heart race every time an officer passed. After nearly 3 hours, she saw Maya walk out. She was talking to another woman, someone older, with files tucked under her arm. They laughed together quietly before parting ways. Maya got into her car and drove home, completely unaware that her mother's eyes had followed her the whole time. That night, Ruth sat in the dark kitchen waiting. When Maya walked in, Ruth switched on the light. We need to talk. No more secrets. Maya stiffened but nodded. She sat down across from her mother, her face serious. You want to know what I do in there? Maya asked quietly. Ruth swallowed hard. Yes. I work in a program. A justice program. I meet people who've done terrible things. I help them face what they did, take responsibility, and, sometimes, meet the people they hurt. It's called restorative justice. Ruth's blood ran cold. The idea of her daughter sitting face to face with dangerous criminals was unbearable. Her hands shook on the table. You mean you talked to them? To men in prison? Maya, why would you put yourself in danger like that? Maya's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. Because someone has to. Because if no one teaches them to face their actions, they come out worse than before. I want to stop the cycle. I want to help people heal. Ruth wanted to argue, to forbid her daughter from ever going back, but the conviction in Maya's voice silenced her. She had never seen her daughter speak with such fire. Still, fear coiled inside her. She shook her head slowly. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Maya reached for her mother's hand. I know, but it's my choice, Mom. And it matters to me. Ruth stared at her daughter's hand, warm against her trembling fingers. She wanted to hold on, but her fear was stronger than her grip. She pulled her hand away, whispering, You don't know what those men are capable of. Maya's face tightened. She stood and walked to her room without another word. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain still falling outside. Ruth sat alone, heart aching. She thought she had discovered the full truth, but deep inside she knew there was more. Something her daughter still hadn't told her. Something locked behind those prison gates that Ruth could not yet see. And soon she would learn what it was. The next days felt like walking on thin glass. Ruth went to work, smiled at customers, wrapped books in brown paper, and thanked people for exact change. But inside, every sound reminded her of keys turning, doors locking, and the heavy echo of boots on a concrete floor. She could not stop thinking about Maya sitting across from men who had hurt others. She could not stop thinking about the prison gates swallowing her daughter every night. On Thursday evening, Maya came home earlier than usual. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her bag still on her shoulder and said, Mom, can we talk? Her voice was careful, like someone approaching a sleeping animal. Ruth set down the dish towel. I'm listening. Maya took a breath. I told my supervisor that you know where I work now. I also told her about our family history. She said I can share more with you, within rules. She paused. We have to be careful about details. But I want you to understand what I do. Ruth nodded and sat. Her hands were cold, even though the oven was still warm from dinner. We run small circles, Maya said softly. We help people say what happened to them. We help people who caused harm say what they did. No excuses. No speeches. Just the truth. Sometimes when survivors want it, there is a meeting. It's always their choice. Ruth swallowed. And you sit with dangerous men? I sit with people who did dangerous things, Maya said. We don't pretend it's safe. We make it structured. 2 facilitators. A clear plan. Exit words. Medical on standby. Doors open. If someone disrespects a rule, we stop. Ruth looked down at the tables with grain, tracing a deep scratch with her fingertip. Why tell me this now? Maya's eyes flicked to the window and back. Because there's something you should know. And I didn't want to say it in anger. Her voice thinned. A few weeks ago, when I was reading the roster for new intakes, I saw a name. She hesitated. Victor Hale. The room went silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to step back and hold its breath. Ruth felt the chair under her, and the floor under the chair, and the world under the floor, and yet she was falling. No, she said, but the word had no place to land. He's there. Maya nodded. Yes. He was transferred in last winter. Her lips pressed together. He is ill. Very ill. Ruth's hands had started to shake without her noticing. She pulled them into her lap and squeezed them still. You've seen him? No, Maya said quickly. I asked to be recused. The director agreed. I am never in the same room with him. I don't read his file. I don't work his circles. Another facilitator handles his case. Her eyes searched Ruth's face. I promise you, Mom. Ruth breathed out a rough sound. The old house creaked like it remembered everything too. Then why tell me? Because yesterday, Maya said, the director called me in. She said Victor requested a mediated apology. He asked for the chance to say he's sorry. He agreed to any boundaries. It would be your choice, Mom. Only yours. If you say no, it ends. If you say yes, the program will build it around your safety. I am allowed to tell you only because you're the person he named. And because I'm family, the team wants everything transparent. The word apology sounded small to Ruth. Much too small for the years it tried to cover. She saw flash images. A broken plate like a white moon on the floor, the red mark of a hand on her arm, the quiet after a slammed door when all the air in the house was afraid to move. An apology? What could it fix? What could it change? I don't forgive him, Ruth said. Her voice surprised her. It had steel in it. You don't have to, Maya whispered. This isn't about forgiveness. The program doesn't ask for that. It's about you having control. Saying what you never got to say. Hearing what you never got to hear, if you want to. She swallowed. He also said he owes you money from the civil case. There's paperwork. He wants to sign. The team can handle it without you, but they won't do anything unless you agree. Ruth stood and walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and turned it off again. The dark window reflected two women, one older, one younger, both standing very still. Why now? Ruth asked without looking at Maya. Why tell me now, not weeks ago? Because I wanted to make sure my job wasn't about him, Maya said. I wanted to be steady first. I needed to learn my limits, learn the rules, get a supervisor's plan. And I didn't want to hurt you by dropping his name without a plan to keep you safe. Ruth turned back, searching her daughter's face. She did not see a child. She saw a woman who had chosen a heavy kind of work and was carrying it with both hands. What happens if I say no? Ruth asked. Nothing happens, Maya said. They close the request. He doesn't get to try again unless you ask. You never have to step into that building. You can mail a letter or send none at all. It's your life. That night, sleep came in pieces. In one piece, Ruth was running through a hallway where the lights kept blinking and every door had the same number. In another, she was at a beach she didn't recognize, and the ocean breathed in and out, pulling words from her mouth she couldn't remember later. When morning arrived, she felt both hollow and strangely clear. She called her therapist at lunch and spoke for a full hour. She said the word prison 15 times and the name Victor only once. She walked to the park after and sat on a bench where the sun warmed the wood and made a bright square on her skirt. A child laughed somewhere behind her. The laugh lifted and broke like glass and then turned into a bird. When Maya came home that evening, Ruth was ready to stand on her own feet in her own house and say what she needed. I will not meet him alone, Ruth said. I want 2 facilitators. I want an advocate for me. I want to decide the room. I want a signal to stop at any time. I will not sit at a table he can reach across. I want a chair with arms. I want water, but with a cap, not a paper cup. I want the door open. And you do not come in the room. Maya nodded after each line, tears filling her eyes, not falling. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. And if I stand up and go, Ruth added, no one follows me. That's the end. That's the end, Maya said. Ruth sat. For the first time in days, her hands were still. A strange calm moved through her, like the steady sound of tires on a long road. She was not forgiving, not forgetting, not fixing him. She was not even meeting him, not really. She was meeting herself, the version of her that had been silenced in a kitchen years ago while a plate broke like a moon on the floor. Maya took out her phone and, with Ruth's permission, texted her supervisor 3 words. Client request session. She looked up. There's one more thing I should tell you, she said gently. He's very sick. The doctor says he may not have much time. That's why the request came now. Ruth breathed in and let the air out slowly. Then this is on my time, she said. Not his. Maya nodded. On your time. Outside, evening slid across the street like a soft curtain. They ate leftovers at the table with the scratch Ruth had traced the night before. It was still there, of course. Some marks do not disappear. But it felt less like damage and more like a history line you can touch without bleeding. Before bed, Ruth opened a drawer and took out an old envelope with court papers she had never used, a list of costs she had stopped looking at, a number she had promised herself not to call. She put the envelope on the counter and turned off the light. Decision was not a bridge to the past, it was a door. And this time, Ruth would hold the handle. The day of the meeting arrived like a slow storm. Ruth dressed in quiet colors and tied her hair back so it would not fall into her face. She put a capped bottle of water in her bag, the kind she'd asked for. At the door, Maya handed her a small card. On it was the exit phrase they'd agreed on. I'm done now. If Ruth said those 3 words, the session would stop. No questions. They drove in silence. At the facility, the air smelled like rain and metal. Inside, Lena met them with calm eyes and a careful smile. John, the advocate, stood beside her with a folder pressed flat under his arm. Room B, Lena said. Door stays open. Your chair has arms. We'll sit between you and him. Water with caps. If you want to leave at any time, say the phrase or stand, and we end it. Understood. Understood, Ruth said. Her voice surprised her. It was steady. They walked into a beige room with a circle of chairs. Light hummed from a strip on ceiling. On the far wall, behind a pane of glass, was a small observation window. Program policy. Maya stood there in a simple sweater, hands folded, not in the room, but near. Ruth felt comfort and ache at same time. Victor entered last, thinner than memory, his face the color of paper. His hands shook. He sat where Lena pointed, across from Ruth, with a table edge and two bodies between them. He did not reach for her with his eyes. He kept them down until Lena nodded. Say why we are here, Lena began. Victor's voice was a scrape. I harmed you, he said. I hurt you. I controlled you. I made our home unsafe. I don't have excuses. There were choices. I chose wrong again and again. Ruth felt a heat rise along her neck, old heat, the kind that once sent her to quiet corners so arguments could pass like storms. This time, she stayed in the middle of the room. John's voice was gentle. Ruth, when you're ready. Ruth unscrewed her water cap, then screwed it back on. You took years from us, she said. You taught me to be small. You taught our daughter to listen for footsteps instead of music. You don't get forgiveness from me today. You don't get a story where you become a better man. You get the truth. You don't define me anymore. Victor nodded like each word hit and stuck. He lifted a shaking hand, not toward her, but toward the folder on the table. There's paperwork, he said. From the civil judgment. I never paid. I told myself I couldn't. I can now. Prison wages. A small insurance payout. I signed the waiver so there's no fight. It goes to you, and if you wish, to whatever else you decide. John opened folder, showed Ruth forms, the signatures, notarized stamps. Lena guided steps, her voice a railing on a steep stair. There's one more thing, Victor said. He looked at the floor. That night last night before you left. The plate broke. I was drunk. You went to the bedroom. I heard the phone click in hallway. His breath hitched. It wasn't the neighbor who called. It was Maya. She was 10. She saved you. She saved both of you. The room seemed to tilt. Ruth felt the arms of her chair under her hands, hard and real. She had believed for years that a neighbor had heard and called. She had written a thank you note. She had baked a pie. She had never asked more questions because asking hurt. Now the shape of that night moved, clicked into a new place. Lena looked at Ruth. Do you want to pause? Ruth shook her head. No. I'm done now with being quiet. She turned to Victor. You don't get to rewrite this. But I will take what is mine. She tapped the folder. The money will go where harm ends, not where it began. Victor nodded. Good. He didn't look up. I'm sorry, he said again, the words flat and plain, no ribbon on them. I know sorry is small. Ruth stood. Not to flee, just to stand. I'm done now, she said, not as an exit, but as a line. Lena understood anyway. She signaled the officer. Session ended because Ruth said it ended. In hallway, John asked, Do you want a few minutes before you see Maya? Ruth shook her head. No minutes. My daughter first. They walked to observation area. Maya stepped out, eyes full, lips pressed tight as if they were holding back a small, fierce river. Ruth took her hands. Did you call? Ruth asked, voice soft. Maya held her mother's gaze. Yes, she said. I took the phone when he went to the kitchen. I was scared. I didn't tell you then because I thought it would make things worse. I wanted us out, not a bigger storm. Ruth's breath left her in a sound that was half laugh, half cry. You were 10. I was your daughter, Maya said. I still am. They hugged in the bright, humming corridor where doors clicked and men in boots walked past without looking. Time folded a little, then opened. Outside, rain had started again, light and fine. They sat in car without turning the engine on. The world felt quieter, like someone had turned a dial. What will you do with the restitution? Maya asked. Ruth looked at the building, at the fence, at the small rectangle of sky between coils of wire. Some will fix old damage, she said. And some will start new things. You said your program helps people face the truth. I want to help people start after it. She smiled, tired and real. A microgrant for survivors, a new lock, first month's rent, a class fee, a safe phone. Small doors people can open themselves. Maya nodded. We can set it up. If you want, we can name it. Ruth thought of the words that had followed her for weeks. Unit C, Room B, the open door. Call it the Open Door Fund, she said. Because today a door stayed open, and I walked out the way I chose. On the drive home, the wipers beat a steady rhythm. At a red light, Ruth glanced at Maya and saw not the child she had protected, but the woman who had been protecting her too, in ways Ruth had never known. The twist that hurt and healed at once was simple. The secret job had not pulled Maya away, it had led Ruth back to herself. And the person who had saved them years ago, the first to break the chain, had been Maya all along. That night, Ruth put the folder on the kitchen table and brewed tea. They made a list together. Call the advocate, talk to a lawyer about the transfer, open a small account for the fund, tell the shelter director Ruth could volunteer on Saturdays. Practical steps. Real ones. No magic. Before bed, Ruth stood at the window and looked at the streetlight washing the sidewalk in gold. She thought of the words she had said in the room. You don't define me anymore. They were true in her mouth. They would be true tomorrow. Maya touched her shoulder. You okay? Ruth turned and smiled, lines at the corners of her eyes, a kind of earned softness. I am, she said. For the first time in a long time, I am. The storm moved on during the night. In the morning, the sky was clear, and the house was quiet, the good kind. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere else, a bus hissed to a stop. Ruth poured coffee. She heard only what was there, not what had been. The past was still a fact, but it was no longer a room that locked behind her. She opened a notebook and wrote the first entry for the Open Door Fund. We start small. We start now. Then she closed the cover, set it by the folder, and went to wake her daughter for breakfast.